if you have a New Year's resolution of changing your job, you might want to pay attention. She might share a few tips on how to stay relevant on your job and how to get things going. She started something a few years ago, and she's stepping aside a few years after. Already done succession planning and so on and so forth. It's quite interesting to see that we have entrepreneurs who, think like she thinks, who don't want to be there for the next 2 decades and trying to figure it out, even though they don't really have any much more to contribute other than the other country. But we're seeing that happen more and more these days. She's an interesting person to speak with. I'll keep it at that. Let her introduce herself, and then we'll take the show from there. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Misan. I am co-founder of WAVE, which stands for West Africa Vocational Education. And we are an organization that was founded in 2013, and we're tackling the youth unemployment problem with a double-sided approach. So on the supply side, we're working with young people, training them on employability skills and connecting them to entry-level work so that they can start a career and build a brighter future. On the demand side, we're working with employers, not just to connect them to entry-level talent, simplify their recruitment search, but also training them on how to better harness the talent that they do have so that they stick around, they perform, they stay engaged, motivated, and the business grows and everybody lives, quote-unquote, happily ever after.
So, vocational, why that particular, why that?
Why that name? So it was important to have that in our name, partly because one of our core values is challenging paradigms. There is a paradigm around vocational education as being less dignified than white-collar work. I grew up understanding vocations to be more around discipline and dedication and specialism and focus. My mom went to Polytechnic and she became a chartered accountant. For me, that's a vocation. Teaching, nursing, etc., all of these are vocations. But I find that when people hear our name, they automatically think, oh, okay, so you're working with this cater of vocations, which have dignity in themselves, but unfortunately that dignity has been stripped over the last few decades. So for us, it was important to use that in our name to have that conversation all the time. Oh, that actually, did you know that hospitality professions, nurses, teachers, all of these are also vocations. Pharmacists are vocations. So it's a conversation starter in and of itself.
So you're brave for venturing into that and that segment of the market. I guess it was some kind of social enterprise.
Yes. Yeah. But one of the paradigms we were trying to challenge is that you can train young people who are lower income and you can be innovative with your business and financial model in order to actually do well by doing good. So that's one of the paradigms.
You do generate income?
Yes.
The business is self-sustaining?
No, it's definitely dependent on grants, but the academies themselves work towards financial sustainability. So because we do a whole bunch of other things that are not necessarily revenue generating yet, but the academies that train and match people, their goal is to be sustainable.
So how long have you been doing this?
6.5 years.
What in the world possessed you to go in this direction? I mean, that's the first question I would ask. How was that journey? Because it's tough working with young people, especially the young people in this generation, and I would tell you that for free. So, just tell us a bit before and where you got that light bulb moment and said, this is what I'm going to do.
I've always been passionate about education and its power to transform. From a kid, I used to want to be a teacher. I just love learning and I love the power of teachers. I think it's the most important job after parenting. Many years later, realizing that, at least I got to the US and realized the power of financial aid. You meet people in a campus that's globally recognized and you have people who are the first generation in their family to go to college because of financial aid. So just seeing that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. Having family members who didn't have the same kind of access to education that I have and seeing the different paths that everyone goes down has just always made me recognize that education is one of the most important levelers in the world. So, fast forward many years later, I was in Nigeria, I was doing my NYSC. I was working with a public policy think tank, and we had these amazing ideas that we were going to carry out about challenging the way policy was done, evidence-based policy. I was so excited. And I found myself spending a lot of time on recruiting. We couldn't find the right talent to get started. We ended up having to design a 2-year training program to get graduates, PhD holders, just to be ready enough to start to generate like work that could be paid for. And so just realizing then that this education thing that I was interested in wasn't just for a certain segment of conversations in society. If we don't get education right, it affects businesses' ability to grow. We had the most amazing idea, we had the resources, everything, but if we didn't have the right talent, we couldn't get it off the ground. So realizing that there is this juxtaposition between education and employment, and we shouldn't think about them as two different sectors. They are a continuum. How do you get young people
one is an input
into the other? And so when I went to Harvard Business School, I had these ideas I was ruminating on. A lot of people knew about these ideas, and so one day some people said, hey, you're interested in education in Africa. Those other guys, I think they're also interested. Why don't you go meet them? And so I went off and introduced myself to a couple of other West Africans, and that's how we started these conversations. So our name, West Africa Vocational Education, is because we were 4 West Africans who were passionate about.
So how would you define education? Because a lot of times when we talk about education, we're always thinking about the 4 walls of the classroom.
No, there's a school of life, there's a school of work, there's the general classroom, brick and mortar. Education is about self-discovery. It's how you learn what you're good at, what you're interested in, and it's how you learn how to think, how you learn how to do, and how you learn how to know. I think a lot of the time our education system here just focuses on how to know, just learning stuff, knowledge for knowledge's sake, but not how to do things, which are actual practical skills. And I don't just mean technical hard skills, I mean the ability to communicate, the ability to debate, the ability to emotional intelligence. Those are all things that you have to know how to do as well.
So talking about working with young ones, is it more, you talked about lawyers, you talked about doctors, you talked about accountants, but some people don't really have that flair. Others just want to work with their mind and their hands.
That's fine. So we focus across, we're focusing on employability skills. What are those? Those are skills that are transferable across any industry. How do you communicate effectively? How do you solve problems by thinking critically? How do you work with others? How do you manage yourself? How do you negotiate? How do you sell? We spend 60% of our life selling, whether we like it or not. So, basic skills like that. Digital skills, which are going to be transferable even in the future and across different sectors. We'd rather focus on those and partner with employers who then give them internships where they learn the practical skills for that particular role that they have chosen. So it's a 3.5-week program. It's 2 weeks in the classroom, and then the 3rd week everyone gets an internship, and it's in that internship that you're going to learn the practical stuff, because every employer has their own way of doing things. And even in that first job after WAVE, we're encouraging you, hey, you're not solving for salary right now, you're really solving for the ability to continue learning. So earn while you learn is one of our slogans at WAVE.
So 4 West Africans came together. Are you still 4 West Africans?
So I was the one who decided to move back to Nigeria and actually turn the idea into reality. So we won a new venture competition. We won the runner-up prize, and that gave us some seed capital, $20,000 after tax, to just come back and actually get started. So we ran our first cohort of people, 2013 August, 12 people in a classroom. They didn't know me from Adam, and I was like, hey, I know you don't know me, I know you don't trust me, you all think this might be 419.
Was this in the States?
No, this was in Lagos. This was here, in Lagos. So 12 young people, most of whom, came from low-income backgrounds, and I told them I wouldn't sleep until I had found as many of them a job as possible. So that was many sleepless nights for those first.
Do they pay you?
So they don't pay up front if they can't afford it. Instead, they can pay out of their first 3 months' paycheck, depending on their salary, 3 to 6 months.
So what other countries were there?
One was from Togo, actually Iranian origin, but had, his family had fled the persecution and grown up in Togo. One was Indian origin, but grown up in Ghana, so it was Ghanaian for all intents and purposes. And then a couple of Nigerians.
Okay, so this is 6 years down the line. What was your biggest challenge back then? And what is your biggest challenge now?
So I remember in the early days, the one thing that I recognized was that I didn't know where to find low-income, unemployed 18 to 35-year-olds. I can't go to a university campus. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, the top 10% of the country are the only ones who can afford to go to university. So I was looking for people who weren't in university campuses. So where do you find 18 to 35-year-olds who are low income? They're on the streets hawking, they are doing something to make money, or they're sitting at home and someone is helping them or something. So how to find young people, I remember that kept me up a lot at night. It's like, we have this great product, we want to test and learn, but not a lot of people are coming into the classroom. How do we find them? And we recognize that actually for every 100 people that applied to our program in that first year, only 7 would graduate. And that was ridiculous. Well, like, what do you mean? We're raising funding in the US and we're saying we're tackling youth unemployment, but we can't get people to finish the program? A lot of young people, you will tell them about the program, say, Monday to Saturday, 8 to 6. No, that one is too much. Oh, can I do it remotely? Can I just come and take an exam at the end? We're like, no. We're trying to simulate the actual work you're going to be doing. So we need to check and build your ability to actually come in to work on time, 8 o'clock to 6 p.m., come in on Saturday. And so we found that a lot of people actually opted out of the program on their own, which was fine. We were very comfortable saying it's not for everybody. If you don't think you can hack it, if you don't think you can take a job that expects you to work on Sundays, if you don't think you can take a job that expects you to work 14 hours, that expects you to stand the whole day, because a lot of our jobs are in the service sector, you're on your feet, there's no chairs, then this is not the program for you. And maybe in a year, if you're still unemployed and life has really shown you some true pepe, then maybe you'll come back.
What do you attribute that to? We'll come to what your challenges are today, but what do you attribute that to in terms of their attitude to work? A lot of people say it's a sense of entitlement. I say it's them not knowing any better.
They don't know any better. I mean, that's one of the questions we always ask people. Like, why do you think poor people are poor? We ask people who are joining our team just to get a sense of how do they see poverty. A lot of times it's people don't know. A lot of times it's your family that is encouraging. Say, no, my Lord has told me that something is in store for you. So those people that are telling you to go and work for 25, 30K there, when you have always suffered, don't take it to. We'll just wait and we'll keep praying. So a lot of times we actually have to develop a class to teach our young people how to navigate family pressures. Because when you're coming to wave and people are like, why you suffer heading? This will be 8 to 6 every day. You don't get home until 9, 10. You're up again at 4 to start coming again. What is all of this,
There's a process to everything in life.
Exactly. So we always say, like, if we could take a bet on a person that would guarantee that they would be successful, what is the one thing? If we could only guarantee that they had this one thing, what would it be? And we always say it's drive and motivation. If the person has that drive and resilience, they will get there. A lot of times people have to get to the true point of deep dissatisfaction before they do something about it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and the mistake that they make is this, that you're young now, you're energetic, you have the energy, you have the time, to be honest, less pressure and a lot of things like that.
Make all your mistakes.
So this is the time to actually do all those things, and just get it out of your system. But by the time they realize it, it's a bit too late, and they're slowing down generally, but then they don't have a choice.
Everyone who comes to our program, they have to go through an information session, and in there we're actually helping them calculate, this is the cost of you every day you're at home and unemployed. You are becoming less marketable. So yes, right now you're only 3 months in unemployment, but in 6 months, your value would have gone down by X.
You're becoming obsolete.
Exactly. And funny enough, our biggest competition is not other training programs, etc. It's handouts. I'm like, how have you been unemployed for 3 years? They say, and the church, they help me now. And my uncle, they help me. So the fact that you have this system that just continues giving people handouts rather than teaching them how to fish means that a lot of people are comfortable just being professional beggars.
I mean, we'll go on a break shortly, but I don't particularly... So it's a twofold thing. If there's a welfare system that takes care of people who are trying to figure stuff out,
then we don't need the handouts.
So exactly. So those handouts are in place of that welfare system.
And even the welfare systems have their own drawbacks, right? But they are important to have.
I agree. So it's a two-edged sword. They say, look, we will support you for 90 days. But within those 90 days, you need to find something.
Demonstrate that you're trying to find work.
There's a time limit. There's a time limit.
So it can't be indefinite, which is why I always say to people, we need to be careful. Even giving handouts to or beggars on the street and in traffic and so on and so forth. A lot of people might agree. This is my opinion, but what happens?
Miss Sarah Wani wanted to say the but I knew it was
Oriwo
Misan.
Yes, which means my head is good.
Yes, and our names are
my destiny will be good.
Yes, fantastic. We need to embrace that. But more importantly, is embracing who you have in your workforce. It's similar to that as well. If you don't appreciate the people you have, are you constantly looking on the outside for more people? How are you sure that they're going to deliver on the promise that they make, or they're going to do better than the people you have in your team? I mean, that's it. Sometimes, yes, it's obvious that you need better hands, but more importantly, it's getting value from the team that you have. And you do quite a bit of that as well.
Yes.
Some of your trainings for your corporate organizations. You want to talk about that?
Yes, so like I said, it's a double-sided approach, and in fact, I joke, but not really joking, that if I could do Wave all over again, I would start by training employers. We just always thought, okay, the big issue is young people are not work ready. If we make them work ready, put them in these organizations, everybody lives happily ever after. But you realize that selection is less than half the battle. You can select the right person, put them in the wrong culture, and they will just follow the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming late, so why is it me carrying it? My papa get them. So people will just lower into that level. So we do a lot of work with training business owners, HR managers about how best to attract the talent, but once you get them in the door, how best to retain them. Basic things like when an employee starts, how many people are actually doing onboarding and actually explaining to them what's expected. So you find a lot of employers complaining, can you imagine they did this? I'm like, okay, but what is the procedure for when the bartender's not around and you don't know how to make the drinks? Oh, okay, you're meant to ask the manager X. If you train people on the actual procedure, then they're not going to be floundering around, etc.
Don't tell the customer, the person that makes it is not around.
He's not around, so we can't have it,
something else
There's a system, right? Then performance reviews. How often do you even give people feedback? You have people who are working for years and don't even know how well they're doing. So they'll now come to you and say, I want a raise. And you, the employer, is like, are you crazy? You are the lowest performer. What are you asking for a raise? But the person doesn't know they're the lowest performer. They're walking around thinking they're the dawn because you haven't set any KPIs and said, hey, in 6 months, this is where I want you to take the business. Are we trying to reduce the number of error rates with our product? Are we trying to increase customer referrals? Let's figure out what we're measuring our performance against, and let's have conversations about it. How do I get promoted? What's the career path? Some people leave because they didn't know that you had all these things planned for them. We would always hear employers say, and this person left. They didn't know I was planning to send them to school. I was going to train them. I said, did you ever tell them? Yeah.
So maybe even if it wasn't a motivating factor, the fact that the person doesn't know
what you have planned for them. You don't give the space for that conversation.
So again, it's a vacuum. Life abhors a vacuum. So what I don't know, I don't lose any sleep over. That's the truth, So
I handed in my resignation, and I gave the minimum notice, or I didn't give notice at all, or I lied that my mother was sick and I'm going, and you just disappear.
At the end of the day,
I get that. Yeah.
What would be the one thing if you had a magic wand and you wanted to, you're struggling with right now? What would that be?
I think the economy is tough, right? So we have double-sided clients. There'll always be unemployed young people. Even as the economy gets worse, that will increase. But businesses themselves are also struggling. Right? So when you ask an employer to come and invest in putting in some of these systems that will help them better train and retain their talent, they are looking at the books and saying, I don't even have that bandwidth to step out of my day-to-day. I'm just trying to keep the business alive. And so sometimes you're there fighting fires as opposed to actually investing in foundational things that will help the business grow in the long term. So when we talk about these trainings that we're trying to get employers to do, both for themselves and also for their employees, it's harder to get people to invest in that.
So you don't really have their buy-in,
Not always. It's hard. Even us as a business, we have talent issues ourselves, and we're always like, oh no, let's fix the things that are right in front of us, but we're not thinking too much about the long term and actually building systems. So we're not pointing fingers. It's just the nature of things. When you want to get outside help, the reason why you get the outside help is not because you don't know the solution yourself. It's because you don't have the bandwidth to just take a step up and actually plan for the long term. You're just busy in the weeds doing the day-to-day. So yeah, growing both the demand side and the supply side of our model continues to be a challenge.
So after 6 years, you decided to take to step aside.
Yep.
Or step down.
Yeah.
I don't know which one it is, but
step aside.
Step aside and appoint a new CEO.
Yeah.
When did you come to that realization? Did you just get bored, or just felt like, look, I can't give this anymore right now? Or
so it was interesting because we started with the business plan. We were in school and we wrote this business plan. It was a 5-year business plan. So in my head, I always thought, okay, 5 years is a long time. I've never done anything for 5 years except for primary and secondary school. I think I can commit to doing this for 5 years and let's see how it goes, right? But in my head, this is a 5-year thing. I've set out goals that I want to achieve for the organization, but I want to build something bigger than me. I've never thought of myself as a lifetime employee in anything. I have multiple personalities and things that I want to do and different interests. But for me, this was, let's build something that someone else and a bunch of people want to come together and own it even more than I do. And I think think that's what we've done over the years. We've built a village of people who genuinely buy into this vision. So one of the things I always say is Wave is owned by everyone and no one. Because of our operating status, there is no equity shareholder who's the big man sitting anywhere. I don't own it. There's a board that can fire the CEO, appoint the CEO, etc. There's very good governance. So no one owns it, but everyone owns it.
But I would ask you very quickly, what's the size, how many students have you trained till date?
So our team full-time, we're 40, and together we have trained through our own academies over 3,000 young people. We've connected about 50% of them to entry-level work. We have partners that we've worked with. So we've worked with Lagos State government, for example. This past week, our team was in Kano. Through our partnerships with governments, we've been able to train another 8,000 young people. And so that's really our path to scale, is that we can go to new cities ourselves and try and build the credibility like we did 6 years ago. Because they'll say, yes, you're in Lagos, but I don't know anybody you have trained. So I'm not coming to your academy. And we're going to have those same problems every time we go to a new city. And so our strategy for expansion is really to partner with people who are already on the ground, who are already a hub for 18 to 35-year-olds. We're even training secondary school teachers and TVET teachers on how to teach these skills so that a young person, by the time they're finishing SS3, instead of going and just sitting for the next 2-3 years doing JAMB and being unemployed, how do they get work already because they're work ready and they've learned these same skills? So
If we have the same conversation in 5 years, what exactly would you be saying now about Wave?
Oh, in 5 years, our curriculum would be taught in every secondary school and vocational training institution so that every young person by the age of 17 is work ready. In 5 years, our number of partners beyond government will include hundreds and thousands of corporations who are actually training their own pipeline of talent. You have lots of banks, GT Bank, Access Bank, they all have their own academies. How do you get them to work more closely with the school system so they're not having to all reinvent the wheel and do their own academies, but we say, hey, there's a banking academy where all the banks can recruit from because they've done the same sort of foundational course. In 5-10 years, we would be in policy conversations where we're actually trying to rewrite the national curriculum so that it teaches these skills. Right now, you can't get a teacher to come and focus on teaching teamwork or teaching communication or teaching emotional intelligence. It's not in the curriculum. WAEC is not marking it. I'm graded for WAEC scores. And so how do we get the national development, NERDC, to actually start to incorporate these skills? They're being done around the world. They're called 21st century skills. We all know that they matter. Why aren't our high school kids, why aren't our secondary school students learning these skills?
I think we need to actually review our curriculum here.
It hasn't been reviewed since the Biafra War. So we have a lot to review.
Kiaris Anozie says, can you confirm if it's the Wave Academy in Yoruba?
Yeah, it's in Yaba.
Because I combated to give a talk to their 2016 grad, and incidentally, I employed one of the graduates by
Yay.
name. Okay, is it Yaba he wanted?
Yeah.
Someplace.
Yeah, where our head office is in Yaba. Our first academy is in Yaba, yes. We have an academy in Ajah as well. And we have 2 mobile teams that actually move around and train.
We have a testimony here.
Yay. And I know Edith Young, personally. Yeah, she came in 2014.
Misan, thanks for coming on the show. Always
Thanks
a
for having me.
pleasure chatting with you. Wish you all the best as you go on your sabbatical. You start in January.
Yes. Thank you.
And wish Wave all the success with the new leadership and the plans going forward.
Thank you.
This has been an edition of Business and Foreign Partnership with Nairametrics. Today, 9th of December 2019. Bugola, that's our show.
Yeah, and thank you for coming.